You're not living in a functioning country anymore. You're living in the decaying shell of one, and no one had the decency to tell you. In 2025, the average American needs $119,000 a year just to feel financially secure. But the median income is $59,000. That's a $60,000 gap, just to feel like you're not drowning. And you are drowning. Over 62% of U.S. adults are living paycheck to paycheck. 1 in 5 renters spends more than half their income just to keep a roof over their head. And while billionaires add $1.5 trillion to their wealth in a single year, you're getting price gouged for food, housing, healthcare, and survival itself. This isn't a slow decline. This is full-blown societal collapse hiding behind Netflix and Uber Eats. And if you think I'm exaggerating, you haven't been paying attention. Let's count down the 10 brutal signs the United States is quietly imploding and no one noticed. You work full-time and still can't afford food? That's not a you problem. That's a broken nation. Let's talk about food. That's a broken nation. Something you need to survive, right? But somehow in the richest country on earth, grocery shopping has turned into a gut punch every single week. And I don't mean folks trying to eat organic or fancy stuff. I'm talking basic bare-bones nutrition. Bread, eggs, chicken thighs, rice, beans. The price of those items, just those, has surged more than 35% since 2020, according to the USDA. And here's the kicker. Wages haven't even come close to keeping up. In fact, when adjusted for inflation, real wages have dropped for 26 consecutive months for middle-income earners. So people are clocking in 40, 50, 60 hours a week, and then standing in the kitchen staring into half-empty fridges wondering how they're going to make it stretch to Friday. This isn't a budgeting problem. It's a system that has quietly decided your labor just isn't worth what it used to be. And the worst part? SNAP benefits, aka food stamps, got slashed this year for over 32 million Americans, with average families losing up to $250/month in food support. So while the price of a dozen eggs hit $6 in some cities last year, and basic milk crept up past $5/gallon, the government's answer was literally, good luck, and forget about eating healthy. The price difference between junk calories and nutritious calories is wider than it's ever been. It's cheaper to feed your kids soda and Doritos than apples and chicken breast. That's not a coincidence. That's how you manufacture a sick, exhausted, dependent population. That's how you keep people just well-fed enough to show up to their second job, but not strong enough to fight back. If this doesn't scream collapse to you, you're not paying attention. You can't run a country where the working class is starving quietly behind closed doors while billion-dollar tech companies are rolling out AI that replaces the same workers. And if you think food banks are the safety net, they're maxed out too. Some are reporting record-level demand not seen since 2008. This isn't the America you grew up in. It's something else entirely. Debt is the new American identity, and it's swallowing everyone whole. You want to know what Americans really own? Not houses, not land, not assets. They own debt, massive, unpayable, generational debt that follows them like a shadow. Let's break it down. Credit card debt just passed $1.13 trillion, the highest in U.S. history. Student loan debt? Still over $1.7 trillion, with interest quietly compounding again now that the pandemic pause ended. And medical debt? Over 100 million Americans are currently struggling to pay off a hospital visit. That's 1 in 3 adults. And it gets worse. A 2024 Bankrate survey showed that 57% of Americans couldn't afford a $1,000 emergency expense without borrowing. Meaning a flat tire, a dental emergency, or a trip to the ER could literally spiral them into financial collapse. And here's the kicker. Over half of that borrowing is now happening at 22% interest rates or higher, rates that used to be reserved for payday lenders and loan sharks. That's now the default rate on mainstream credit cards. We've quietly normalized usury and called it capitalism. And let's not forget cars. The average new car loan is now over $40,000, with payments pushing past $730/month for many drivers. So yeah, maybe you have a job and a place to sleep, but if you actually zoom out, you don't own your life. The bank does. And if you think you're immune because you have a stable job, keep in mind job openings dropped by over 700,000 in Q3 2025, and layoffs in tech, finance, and media are back in full swing. This isn't a slow grind, it's an implosion. The economy is eating itself. Debt is how they keep the illusion alive. You get just enough to survive but not enough to leave. They want you tethered. And now, with buy now, pay later apps exploding, People are literally financing pizza and deodorant through Klarna and Afterpay. You're watching an entire country forget what ownership even means. There is no dignity in this. Only survival. The middle class isn't dying. It's already dead. Let's cut through the noise. The middle class is gone. It's a ghost. And if you're still clinging to the idea that it exists, it's probably out of nostalgia, not reality. In 1971, over 60% of Americans were solidly middle class. You could buy a house, raise a family, and take a vacation, all on a single income. Fast forward to today, that number has dropped to barely 43%, and even that's a stretch because most of those people are living paycheck to paycheck, drowning in housing costs, and pretending they're okay. The truth? The only people really thriving in this economy are the top 10%, and even they're starting to sweat. You know how you know it's bad? Luxury apartment vacancies are rising even in cities like Dallas and Denver, because rich people are downsizing before the storm hits. Meanwhile, the median American family can't even afford the median home anymore. In fact, in 2025, it now takes 45% of your gross income just to afford a starter home. That's the worst affordability since 1984. And what's the government's answer? Extend your mortgage to 50 years. That's not a solution. That's a financial death sentence. You'll die before you pay it off, and your kids will be left with the crumbs. The only reason it hasn't all collapsed yet is because people are silently trading dignity for survival, moving back in with parents, renting garages, living in RVs, cutting back to 2 meals a day. They're hiding it, but you can see it if you look. Thrift stores that used to be empty are now packed. WIC applications have spiked in states like Arizona and Ohio. Teachers are quitting en masse not because they hate kids, but because they can't afford to teach anymore. The middle class didn't slip through the cracks. It got crushed under the weight of housing, healthcare, taxes, and student debt, all while being told to invest in themselves. Invest in what? Gas is $6 in some cities, and people are still being charged overdraft fees on $12 transactions. It's not a recession, it's a realignment of power. And you're not in the winning half. Infrastructure is collapsing, but you're still paying top dollar for it. Let's talk roads, bridges, airports, power grids. You know, the stuff that keeps a modern country running. You'd think for the $4.9 trillion we pay in taxes annually, we'd be living in some futuristic utopia. But instead, we're in a crumbling, potholed wasteland with 1940s electrical systems and 1970s water pipes. 43% of U.S. roads are in poor or mediocre condition, and over 46,000 bridges are structurally deficient, and that's by government standards, which are laughably lenient. Drive across rural Mississippi or upstate New York, and you'll literally feel your tires shake. And don't even get me started on Amtrak. Our national rail system moves slower than trains in India and costs 3 times as much. Meanwhile, airports in Houston and Chicago are leaking, breaking down, or so short-staffed that flights are getting canceled daily. And while all this is happening, utilities are failing. Texas lost over 240 lives during the 2021 winter storm, and in 2024 they warned it could happen again due to grid instability. California is rationing water. Baltimore had a 6-day water contamination alert in 2023. And still, we're paying record-high utility bills, maintenance fees, road tolls, and service taxes. You're literally being charged premium prices for third-world infrastructure. And when things go wrong, there's no safety net. FEMA has been so gutted and underfunded that hurricane and flood victims are now told to apply for assistance and wait 8-12 months. That's not a system. That's abandonment. America doesn't even pretend to build anymore. China lays down 500 miles of high-speed rail in a year. We argue about zoning for 15 years and still end up with a strip mall. The roads are broken, the pipes are rusting, and the only thing getting built anymore? Data centers, server farms, digital surveillance hubs. It's almost like the physical world is being left to rot while the real investment, the real future, is in controlling everything virtually. Welcome to America 2.0, collapsing outside, thriving behind firewalls. Retirement is a fairy tale, and millions are about to find out the hard way. You've been told your whole life to save for retirement. 401k, Roth IRA, compound interest, all the buzzwords. But here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. Most Americans will never retire. Not really. They'll work until they're dead or disabled, and even then they'll be scraping by on Social Security that's losing value by the year. According to the Federal Reserve, the median retirement savings for Americans aged 55-64 is $134,000. Sounds decent, right? Until you realize that'll barely cover 2 years of expenses in most cities. And even worse, 40% of people that age have less than $50,000 saved. That's not a cushion. That's a countdown to disaster. And let's not forget, Social Security is projected to run out of full funding by 2033. What's the plan then? Raise the retirement age to 70? Reduce benefits by 25%? Oh wait, they already proposed that. And all this while inflation eats away at your savings like acid. Your 401k isn't growing, it's treading water. You're being bled dry by management fees, volatile markets, and the rising cost of literally everything. Health insurance in retirement? For a couple, it's estimated to cost $315,000 over 20 years. That's if you're healthy. If you're not, good luck. And while you're trying to play catch-up at 60, AI is replacing workers faster than ever. You're competing with 24-year-olds, H-1B visa holders, and chatbots that work for free. The job market doesn't care how many years you've put in. They'll restructure your position and toss you a LinkedIn course on career transitions. This is the America we built, where the golden years have rusted out completely. The only people retiring comfortably are the ones who already owned assets before 2008. Everyone else? You're on your own. The dream is dead. But they won't tell you that, because then you might stop participating. The healthcare system doesn't care if you live, only if you can pay first. You ever notice how every other developed country treats healthcare like a human right, and here in America, it's treated like a luxury good? Let's get something straight. We don't have a healthcare system, we have a for-profit illness industry, and if you get too sick to work, you're not just fighting for your life, you're fighting to not lose everything. In 2025, the average premium for employer-based health insurance has risen to over $8,000 a year for an individual, and that's before you even get to the $1,600 deductible copays and non-covered services. Got a family? Multiply that by 4. And God forbid you're self-employed or a gig worker, private health insurance now regularly crosses $1,500/month for a basic plan, and that's with $10,000 plus deductibles. But the real horror? The out-of-pocket costs after insurance. Americans now owe over $220 billion in unpaid medical debt. That's $700 for every person in the country, including kids. And what happens if you can't pay? Your account goes to collections. Your credit gets destroyed. Some states even garnish your wages or put liens on your property. You want to know how far gone we are? Cancer patients, people literally fighting for their lives, are launching GoFundMes to afford chemo. One study from 2024 found that 1 in 3 cancer patients in the U.S. skip treatment due to cost. That's not a healthcare system. That's structural genocide with polite paperwork. Meanwhile, Big Pharma is raking in record profits. The top 20 drug companies made over $150 billion in profit last year. And don't even think about calling an ambulance unless you're prepared to drop $1,200, $4,000 for the ride. That's the price of survival now. And if you end up in the ER without insurance, you're billed 5 to 10 times more than what Medicare would pay for the same treatment. So yes, you're being financially punished for getting sick. In America, illness is a death sentence, and health is a privilege purchased by the few. That's not a system on life support. That's one that already flatlined and just hasn't been declared dead yet. Schools have become daycares with debt traps attached. Let's talk about education. The thing we were all told was the path to a better life. The truth? That path has been bulldozed and replaced with a debt-ridden, underfunded mess that barely prepares kids for a functional adulthood and leaves millions worse off than when they started. First, public K-12 schools are in crisis mode. Over 300,000 teachers left the profession since 2020. Why? Because they're expected to be educators, therapists, armed guards, and social workers, all while making less than $55,000 a year in most states. And guess what? Classroom sizes are exploding. In some counties, it's now 35-40 kids per class. Textbooks are outdated. HVAC systems are broken. And teachers are buying supplies with their own money again. Meanwhile, over in higher education, we've reached the $1.77 trillion mark in student loan debt. That's more than credit card and auto loan debt combined. And what's it buying people? Degrees that don't even guarantee jobs anymore. In fact, 40% of recent grads are working in jobs that don't require a degree. Because the job market is flooded, AI is replacing white-collar work, and wages have stagnated for over a decade. And for those thinking of trade schools as an alternative, good luck. The cost of vocational programs has doubled in the last 15 years too. So you're not escaping the debt, just picking a different flavor. Private universities are now charging $70,000, $90,000 per year, and public colleges aren't far behind when you factor in housing, books, and fees. And here's the kicker: the quality of education hasn't improved. In fact, a 2025 national survey revealed that college freshmen are now entering with 12th grade reading skills and graduating with them. So we've monetized diplomas, gutted the core curriculum, and turned young adults into lifelong borrowers before they've even entered the workforce. That's not a ladder to success. That's a treadmill with a payment plan. America didn't fail to invest in education. It chose to convert it into a subscription service where knowledge is leased, not earned. The police don't prevent crime. They just manage desperation. Let's get uncomfortable. The United States has more police departments than any country on earth, over 18,000 separate agencies, with budgets totaling over $140 billion a year. And yet somehow violent crime is rising again in nearly every major metro. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The police were never designed to stop crime. They're designed to manage the aftermath, and more importantly, to protect property and enforce poverty. You know it's true. Go to any wealthy suburb, and the cops will help you with directions or rescue your cat from a tree. Go to any low-income urban neighborhood, and they're showing up in armored vehicles with rifles drawn over a shoplifting call. Why? Because policing in America has become a tool for social containment, not justice. And if you need proof, look no further than the growing number of ticket-based towns across America. In places like Valley Brook, Oklahoma, 68% of the city's revenue comes from traffic citations and fines. That's not law enforcement. That's state-sanctioned extortion. And if you're poor, every interaction with police is a potential life destroyer. A $150 ticket turns into a $600 warrant. A missed court date becomes a jail sentence. A minor offense becomes a criminal record that follows you for decades. And all while actual crimes like wage theft, corporate fraud, and environmental abuse go completely unpunished. You can rob $1 billion in a Ponzi scheme and walk free. But if you steal baby formula during a recession, you'll get hit with felony charges in half the country. And let's not even get into police militarization. Local departments now own MRAPs, sniper rifles, and grenade launchers, thanks to surplus Pentagon gear. So ask yourself, who are they preparing to fight? Criminals? Or a population that's getting poorer, angrier, and more desperate? America isn't safer. It's just more tightly controlled. And the people in charge are betting that fear and surveillance will be enough to hold it together. But history says otherwise. The American dream has been rebranded into a lifestyle scam. What if I told you the American dream didn't die, it just got turned into an Instagram ad? That's where we are. The modern version of success isn't about freedom, stability, or fulfillment. It's about appearances. It's about looking wealthy while silently going broke. And that's by design. The entire system now revolves around selling the illusion of upward mobility, while quietly rigging every part of it against you. You're pushed to buy a home, but interest rates are now above 7%, and the average home price is nearing $450,000 nationally. You're told to invest in yourself, but tuition is unpayable. You're encouraged to build your brand online, but algorithms crush organic reach unless you pay. Even side hustles, the last refuge of the working poor, have become predatory. Amazon, Uber, Etsy, Airbnb, they all promise freedom, then bleed you with fees, terms, and brutal competition. Meanwhile, influencer culture keeps pumping out perfect lives and fake wealth, pushing everyday people to max out credit cards for aesthetics. You want proof? Consumer spending on luxury goods, especially among middle-class earners, hit a record high in 2024. People are literally going into debt to keep up with a lie. And don't think the corporations mind. They profit either way, whether you make it or fake it. The old American dream was about land, family, and community. The new one is about content, clout, and consumption. But here's the thing. No one's talking about what happens when that illusion cracks, when the credit runs out, when the algorithm changes, when the facade falls apart and all that's left is a mountain of debt, no savings, and an audience that's moved on. That's what's coming. And when it does, people will realize they were never building a dream. They were participating in a pyramid scheme that only pays out at the top. America isn't collapsing. It's already collapsed. You just haven't been notified yet. Here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. Not on the news, not in Congress, not on those hopeful Sunday talk shows. America didn't start collapsing. It already did. You're not in the middle of a decline. You're standing in the smoldering wreckage, and the only reason it still feels like a functioning country is because we've normalized the collapse. You've adapted. You've accepted $6 eggs and $2,000 rent, and $700/month car payments as just how it is. You've learned to scroll past war headlines, ignore the daily shootings, and laugh at the price of gas like it's a joke and not a symptom. We live in a country where 70% of the population is on at least one prescription drug, where suicide rates are at an all-time high, where life expectancy is dropping, not rising. That's what collapse looks like. But because it's happening slow, street by street, bill by bill, hour by hour, most people won't even call it what it is. That's how psychological warfare works. You lower expectations, normalize dysfunction, and keep people just entertained enough to not rebel. But here's the thing, infrastructure doesn't lie, debt doesn't lie, hunger doesn't lie. When 1 in 5 kids lives in poverty, when 3 in 10 adults skip meals to afford rent, when 60% of the population has less than $1,000 in savings, that's not a resilient nation. That's a failed one. So don't wait for CNN to announce it. Don't wait for Congress to fix it. The warning lights have been flashing for years. The only question left is, what do you do now that you know?